As I just said before the break, today is the budget, and what we do know is when Labour came into power, all buoyed by the sense of being back in business after 14 years in the wilderness, they got excited about doing very Labour-y things, didn't they? They increased public spending, went on public sector pay rises anyway by a significant amount, and they also went a little bit giddy about all of the green policies they could roll out. Ed Miliband stood in his field of wimwoms with his ukulele and decided he was going to buy up most of the national grid and create GB Energy. These things cost money. Well, when it comes to the green agenda, things aren't necessarily going according to plan, though, because shocking charts have revealed that electric car sales have slumped. People don't want to buy them. This whole push to go net zero by making everybody ditch their diesel and petrol-powered cars and instead charge them outside their houses and on a myriad charging points that frankly don't exist isn't really working. Well, let's speak to Ross Clark now, who's journalist and columnist at The Sun. I mean, Ross, this doesn't really surprise me, I must admit. Electric vehicles cost far more than normal vehicles. There aren't many of them floating around in the used car market. Most people, if they live in a rented accommodation or a flat, I've no idea how they're going to charge these things up. And frankly, a lot of the benefits from buying electric vehicles, such as not having to pay road tax and so on and so forth, or emissions costs, seems to be being stripped away anyway.
Good morning. Yes, I mean, this is a prime example of what happens when the government tries to force a product on consumers who don't want to buy it. And no, an electric car can make sense if you do lots of short journeys. You've got somewhere off road that you can recharge it. You know, it's a good product. You can save money. But, you know, there's 9 million people in this country who do not have off-street parking. A lot of them might do long journeys. Electric car is a very difficult beast to deal with, and you're relying on these public charging points. A lot of them use these sort of wretched phone apps, and there are sort of multiple phone apps, and it's just, you know, the hassle factor is just absolutely horrible for these a lot of these electric cars. And you know, as a result, combined with the high purchase price of electric cars, it is putting people off. But it's causing a very, very serious problem for our motor industry because, you know, and I'm not blaming the current government for this, because it was the previous government came up with the zero electric vehicle mandate, which obliges car manufacturers to ensure that at least 22% of the vehicles they sell this year are pure electric. If they fail, they get fined to the tune of £15,000 per car. Well, you know, the market is stalled at about 16%. And what's the result of that is these manufacturers are facing a huge cliff edge by the end of the year where they will be fined masses for failing to sell enough electric cars.
My understanding, though, is the original end point of phasing out the production of electric vehicles was that 2030, is now potentially being pushed back to 2035, perhaps a glimmer of common sense from the Labour Party. But when it comes to owning an electric vehicle, my understanding is the cost of charging it is pretty expensive. There's not really much of a benefit from petrol when it comes to switching to electric in that regard. The cost of insuring it as well, because if anything happens to the battery, you're in big trouble.
Yes, insurance costs are another big factor in recent years, because the insurance industry is having problems of underwriting electric cars, given a sort of rather different risks pattern. Electric cars are very prone to what are called thermal runaway fires, and you know, they might not, you know, petrol and diesel cars do have fires, of course, but electric car fires have proved to be very, very much more bigger and dangerous, and also small bumps, you know, which in a petrol diesel car might not matter much, you know, can cause an electric car to be written off. But just on the running costs, I mean, it's cheap to run an electric car if you can plug it in at home. Rely on public chargers, and it's very, very much more expensive. But the whole thing at the moment is swung in favour of electric cars. It's very important to remember this. You know, when you fill up with petrol or diesel, about half of what you pay is going in tax. Now, if you charge your electric car at home, all you're paying is 5% VAT on that electricity. Now, at some point, the government is not going to sit by and wait as £28 billion of annual revenue from fuel duty goes down the tube. They're going to tax electric cars in a similar way to petrol and diesel cars taxed at the moment, which is probably going to mean road pricing, to be frankly. It may even be Rachel Reeves and nods to that in the budget later on. But so, at the moment, electric car drivers are enjoying a great big free introductory offer. When those taxes are adjusted and electric cars owners are sort of fingered for money in the same way as petrol and diesel car owners are at the moment, it's going to be a very, very different story.
Yeah, I always think it's a slightly false economy as well, because what, CO2 is being released in the manufacture of electric cars, in the creation of their batteries, what fuels are being used to actually put the energy in the charging points in which electric vehicles are being charged. But let's talk now about this other story, because I actually have a suspicion things are interconnected here. Villagers have been told they must pay £73,000 to end a dispute over potholes that's lasted for about 64 years. This is Furno Pelham in Hertfordshire, and it's believed to be the UK's longest-running potholes row over the 125-metre-long White Barnes Lane. Hertfordshire County Council maintains that the lane, which has 32 potholes, is a footpath, not a road. That means it's not eligible for resurfacing at public expense unless it is adopted by the council as a public road. Thereby, the villagers will have to pay out of their own pockets £73,000. Now, I wonder here, this battle has gone on in theory for 64 years, but when it comes to potholes, we know we live in a pothole-riddled nation now. It's very easy. You go down the state of our roads as you drive about in the UK is worse than developing world countries. And I have a suspicion that this might be in part due to the increased weight of vehicles on the road, because they're lugging around girt batteries.
Well, yeah, the electric cars are significantly heavier than petrol and diesel cars, and that is going to cause more damage to the road, although not as much, of course, as lorries and buses and much heavier vehicles. But what's happened in this particular instance, I used to live on a very similar road. It's a private road, a public footpath, but a private road, and the council sort of don't think that it's their responsibility to pay to maintain it. But in this particular case, the council at some point built a council estate down the road, and all those people who live on that estate rely on this road to get anywhere. So, if you're going to build a council estate, you'd think the council would at least adopt the road and take the responsibility to maintain it. But, of course, councils don't want to do that. If they can possibly wriggle out of road maintenance, they will. But, yeah, what's happened to this? Over the past 5 years, the government's put in over £2.5 billion into this potholes fund, supposed to repair sort of millions of potholes over the country. And, the roads seem to be in a worse state than ever. And you think, what's happened to that money? And, I recently sort of drove around my hometown, Cambridge, around in the main road, looking for potholes. And it's remarkable how many of them were on main roads and also on roads which the council had claimed to have spent the money repairing. And it was very noticeable sort of how little return we seem to be getting for our money.
Indeed, it feels like that every day, and I'm sure we're going to be learning more about that particular narrative after the budget. Ross Clark, thank you ever so much, a journalist and columnist at The Summer.